Welcome, everyone, to Office Hours, episode 11. I'm your host, Davis Hunt, editor-in-chief of the Pamphleteer. We got a good show ahead of us today, as usual. We're going to run through the past week of Pamphleteer coverage, kind of cover some of the highlights, and talk to my guest, Ryan Turbeville, about Freemasonry. Ryan's a Freemason, and we're going to kind of get into, try to, see if we can dispel some myths, talk about the history of Masonry, and that kind of thing. So if you're not familiar with the Pamphleteer, we are a Nashville-based publication that fancies ourselves as something like a digital version of the Alt Weekly. In Nashville, we have the Nashville Scene. If you're from Los Angeles, you might be familiar with the LA Weekly. In New York, you have the Village Voice. We kind of inherit from that spirit of a cultural publication, albeit from a not only a different distribution format, but also different perspectives on culture and that kind of thing. So we do three of these live shows. I do my show on Wednesday nights. Tomorrow night we have Megan Podsiedlick's Nashville Savvy, which is at noon, and Jared Hollyfield's Culturally Appropriate, which is on Friday at noon. Jared covers film culture. He's going to go back and talk about. I'm actually going to be on his show this week. We're going to go back and talk about the Nashville Film Festival, which I have a lot of strong opinions on, having attended that pretty frequently over the past 5 or so years. Megan tends to cover Nashville specific stuff. We just elected a new Metro Council, so tomorrow on her show, she's going to get into the weeds with that. Some of the new characters, talk about what's going on with the Metro Council. We have a new mayor. A lot of things to discuss, a lot of new faces, a lot of potential, well, likely thorns in resident sides going to emerge from that one. So yeah, that's normally what we do. So we'll start looking at what we did this past week. So first up, some development news. If you guys are familiar in Belmead, you have the old Belmead Theater, which when I was growing up at one point was a bookstore, and I think they've used it as kind of one of these event spaces for these digital, these new kind of big space digital projection, virtual reality, walkable things. If that makes any sense. To occupy that, but they're going to tear that down and build 236 apartment residential units. It's going to be anchored by a Kroger, because the Kroger down the street is going away with that new giant development, which if you're not familiar with that, then maybe just look up all the drama around the Belmead. I can't remember Belmead Plaza. At the Belmead Plaza, which you got the Kroger there. You've got that Mexican restaurant. You've got what used to be Office. I think it was Office Depot or Office Max. I can't remember. And the famous Starbucks, cigar lounge, etc. That's all getting demolished. New development put in there. They're going to move the Kroger down the street because, despite being the wealthiest zip code in the city, and maybe even in the state, I'm not sure if Williamson County has outstripped it. Everyone still likes to shop at Kroger, so they're putting in a Kroger. Here's what it looks like here in the top right corner, if you're not familiar. Pretty fantastic. I've always liked the marquee there, and it's good to see that they're going to reincorporate that in the apartments. I'm sure it's not going to look near as nice, but I guess the gesture is what counts. Second thing, this guy, last week we talked about the guy buying the fire department next door to ML Rose and next to Smoking Thighs. Well, this week he bought the Smoking Thighs too. So now he owns two adjacent properties. It'll be interesting to see what this developer does with that. No plans have been released. Could be pretty interesting. No idea what to expect there. Third thing, a recent ruling in the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is this building is in Cincinnati, Ohio, rejected a request from families and medical providers to block the Tennessee law banning gender-affirming medical care. So that had been previously blocked from being enforced. It went into law, took effect in July of this year. The ACLU sued the state in order to block it from being enforced, and the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals rejected that appeal. So now we can, now that law is in place. You can no longer perform transition surgeries and that kind of thing on children under the age of 18. Here's a statement from Jonathan Skrmetti, the Attorney General. This is a big win for democracy. Decisions that are not clearly resolved by the Constitution should be resolved by the people through their elected representatives. I'm so proud of our team who stood strong against the overwhelming resources arrayed against Tennessee in this case. Encouraging sign there. Next up, this is a school choice analysis that came out, put Tennessee number 6. Grades were scored overall from, it's a variety of things. It's just a measure of education freedom in the states. Tennessee got number 6, which I thought was kind of interesting given the sentiment. If you're to take a test the waters and see what people would think about school choice. If you take it from people in Shelby County and Davidson County and various media outlets, you would think that the state was dead set against it. But they came behind. Florida was first, Arkansas was second, Indiana was third, Arizona fourth, and Iowa was fifth. And then Tennessee was sixth. So, interesting bit of news there. So this is kind of the big thing this week. This is Gabrielle Hanson. She's running for mayor in Franklin and is frankly one of the more embarrassing candidates to emerge in recent memory. Hanson is running for mayor of Franklin, the city, and has made a number of gaffes that just reveal her to be essentially incompetent, even though in the aggregate I may agree with kind of her political direction. I do think that by and large, the city of Franklin, like most other municipalities, especially in Tennessee, are a bit behind the curve in terms of realizing, what the time it is politically. We live in a very different time than when the current mayor and the more established political players in Franklin came into office. And Gabrielle Hanson does, in a way, represent the evolution of the Republican Party in this more populist, more assertive direction. And so from that vantage, I can understand where she's coming from, and I understand the movement that has been built behind her. That said, this woman is completely unfit for public office. She's made a number of gaffes that would just make your head spin. Everything from using photos that she stole from someone's social media profile that lived in Chicago to show, kind of the diversity of her supporters, to questions being raised about where she actually lives. Her husband ran for Congress in Chicago in 2021, and she's had a house here, I think, since 2013, 2012, but it's not clear if that was just kind of a placeholder. There's a lot to say about her. What else was there? Well, she started putting out campaign materials and posting signs before she'd actually officially signed her paper in her public intent to run. Oh, how can I forget this? The biggest thing is that a background check revealed that in 1995, she was charged with 2 counts of promoting prostitution and 1 count of money laundering. And she responded to this accusation with this kind of meandering Instagram selfie post about, it was a tough time and she took this job and didn't realize what she was doing and this and that. Just exhibiting what you would expect someone with poor judgment to say, which is that I had poor judgment. At least she's forthright about that. But I don't think that she has any place she doesn't belong anywhere near a position of leadership, and has nothing to do with what her political beliefs are. Everything to do with how she comports herself, the way that she manages herself. She's not a political candidate. It's embarrassing for a political movement to put up something like this. And this is the kind of thing that can be irreparably damaging to a political movement if someone like this emerges as your figurehead. I don't know what else to say about it. Just type her name in online. Daily Beast has started covering it, and they make fun of her. I mean, she's worth making fun of. She's a clown. She does not deserve to have any say in political matters. I don't know why. I don't know what else to say about it. So that's my spiel on her. Gabrielle Hanson. Avoid. Red flags. We're not touching her. or anything about not hitting the vote for her if you live in Franklin, hopefully. All right, that's it for the week. So my guest this week is Ryan Turbeville. Ryan is a Freemason here in Nashville. He's also a real estate developer. And we're not going to talk about real estate. We're going to talk about Freemasonry. The reason I wanted to have Ryan on is because as you move around town, you encounter people that are Freemasons, and Masonry is I guess we'll get into this specifically, but it's the oldest male fraternity, maybe not male, but I guess fraternities are all male, aren't they? Fraternal. It's the oldest fraternity in the Western world, maybe the world, and is, subject to all sorts of, sits at the center of a number of conspiracy theories and this and that. I mean, I'm sure that if you spent any amount of time browsing the internet, you probably run across some conspiracy theory that puts the Freemasons at the base of it. It's controversial in Catholicism. I don't think they allow their church members to be members of Masonry. So anyway, we're gonna talk about that. I'm gonna bring Ryan up.
How's it going?
Ryan, thanks for joining me.
Great to be here.
How are you?
I'm doing well. So
I mean, I know this. But for our viewers, you're phoning in from Nashville. You're in Nashville, like me.
Yeah, I'm a native Nashvilleian, lifelong Nashvilleian. Been a Freemason for about 15 years now. So I think most Nashvilleians have probably driven or walked by the Grand Lodge of Tennessee. It's a giant building on the corner of 7th and Broadway. Probably passed it 100 times and may not have even noticed it. There's lodges in every city, every small town, about 300 lodges and 307, I think, lodges in Tennessee, somewhere around there. So odds are, kind of like realtors, you probably know a Freemason, if not multiple ones. I think we're at around 28,000 members in the state. So, and even if you don't know one personally, there's a good chance that your grandfather or great-grandfather or somebody in your family was, especially if you're from the American South. So
it seems like Masonry, let's just get straight into it. It seems like Masonry was much more popular in the past. I don't know what like per capita membership was previously and what it is now, but I mean, is it lower or higher? I would assume that it's lower. There's probably fewer Freemasons than there were.
Yeah, our membership's been declining essentially since the 60s, and it's been a slow thing. We had a big boom after World War II, had a big boom after World War I. I think a lot of men came home and they had this fraternalism and this bond and this brotherhood overseas, and they came home wanting something here, and Masonry provided that for them. So it's really a demographic challenge that we've been hard for us to overcome over the last 50 years. Of you just had this gigantic boom, and then coinciding with that, you have the movements in the 60s, which kind of started to break down a lot of institutions in America. And it's not just Masonic attendance that's down, but Moose lodges and Rotary clubs and churches and on and on and on and on. It seems like people don't join and get involved in organizations as much as they used to. I think, you can use that as an excuse. Obviously, no organization is outside of the or above their society, but I think that we as Freemasons are called to be that we're not supposed to be at cultural whims. And it's why we've been around for at least 400 years, probably longer. And I think we're going to be around a very long time. Things go in cycles. This isn't the first time in our history where we've seen membership dip. We've came back. And I see a very, very bright future for Freemasonry.
What do you owe the kind of general decline of fraternal organizations in the 60s to? Maybe a hard question to answer. There's a lot of things that happened in the 60s that we're kind of reckoning with now, but
Yeah. I mean, I think that's where a lot of the trends line starts, really late 60s, 70s. Uh, there's a book called Bowling Alone. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
yeah.
There's a lot of, I've heard many theories. I'm not sure if I truly have one that I buy totally. And it's probably a combination of a lot of things. I think you see technology obviously playing a role here lately. It's people are just stuck on their phones, stuck on screens. COVID certainly didn't help with some of this. I think you've seen in the past people that normally would get together and have like one thing, a third space is what that book refers to it as, something that's not home and not work. And I think that, hold on a second, sorry. That's a
You got someone.
Yeah. Yeah, so people would have like a third space. Well, now you have the opportunity for a lot of different things, whether that's digital or at least in the case of being in a city like Nashville, there's always something to do, right? And there's a lot of FOMO. I think people are less willing to commit to things, right? I mean, have you ever like had a party and you've planned it like a month out and like half of the people won't RSVP until like a day before, 2 days before?
Yeah.
Because there's just like this fear of, oh, well, there might be something better out there, But I say all that to say, I don't think that's served us well as a culture. I don't think people are happier. I think all sorts of numbers reflect that, whether you look at suicides or drug usage or divorces or like on and on and on and on, where people are lacking meaning, they're lacking true community, they're lacking true friendships. I think Masonry provides that. So that's why I'm very optimistic about its future. And I don't think we have to reach, me personally, I don't have a numbers goal. I don't think the goal of Masonry is to have every man be a member. It's quite the opposite. I think we are an exclusive organization, and that the way we should judge our success or not is not by the number of men we have, but the quality of men and our impact on society. So
I think another one of the trends that started in that period was declining church attendance, and we're still seeing that continue to plummet. And I wonder if do you see Masonry as like a substitute for church in a increasingly secularized world, or do you see it as something that could I mean, is it something that could step in for a church? I know that there's probably a lot of young men who are unattracted to going to church for whatever reasons. And a fraternal organization is probably a little more attracted, like hanging out with the boys.
yeah,
Like there's something, I think a lot of people's opposition to church is rooted in this kind of, well, I don't know. I don't really care to psychoanalyze that, but I do wonder if Masonry pitches itself as an alternative or something that in an ideal world would play well with some church, like, because I know a lot of organizations do not allow Masons to join because of the secretive nature of the organization, and that they see that as kind of undermining the relationship of uh, between a church and its member, or between the church and the community. So
yeah.
how would
Well,
you respond to that?
we've certainly never positioned ourselves as an alternative to church. It's a supplement. In Masonry, part of being a Freemason, there's historical significance to that work and how it developed. But now the symbolic meaning of Freemason really does come down to free will, free thought, freedom of religion. All we require is that you do have to believe in a supreme being. We don't tell you what that is. We're open to men of all different religious faiths. We're just not open to atheists. Can't be an atheist and be a Mason. And for the longest time, when Masonry was at at its peak, so is the church. So I don't see them being competing at all. Masonry is a system of self-improvement for men and how to live your life today, how to be a better father, a better husband, better person, better community member. It's not a path to salvation. It's not a religion. It tells you that in becoming a better man, in working to improve yourself, that you should have a spiritual side, that you should believe in God, worship God. It just doesn't tell you how you should do that. That's left up to your own decision. Now, in the Western world, especially in the American South, the overwhelming majority of Masons are Christians, but we've got plenty of guys that are Jewish and Buddhists and Hindus and deists and all the above, And it's not something we are even allowed to talk about. We don't get in religious arguments with each other. Part of trying to keep harmony and unity within a fraternity, within a brotherhood, is to perhaps stay away from some of those hot button issues. So we're not even allowed to talk about religion in lodge. Now, obviously, as you get to know other members and build relationships, you end up talking. I talk about religion with my brothers in private, but it's not something that comes up as part of a discussion in a lodge. And
how is Masonry different than a college fraternity? I was briefly in a college fraternity.
well, a lot of your college fraternities were founded by Masons, so a lot of them will have a ritualistic aspect. Some of them have rituals very similar to ours because Masons wrote them and they just kind of borrowed and copied. Obviously most Greek fraternities are a little bit more focused on the social aspect. There's no keg parties in Masonry, no date parties, but the basics, I think, greatly overlap of just an idea of brotherhood, fraternalism, charity, self-improvement, looking out for each other. I think that I'm a Kappa Sig, so I went through the college fraternal experience, which really wasn't the main reason I joined Masonry, but it certainly helped sell it for me. I was already sold on the idea of fraternalism in general. So
when you say, what do you mean when you say self-improvement? Are you talking about slonking raw eggs and eating red meat, or is there a program that Masonry has in place that guides you through that process, or is it just
a lot of it's more philosophical and moral, and maybe we would say strategic versus tactical. We don't have a Masonic meal plan, but we definitely say you should be healthy and take care of your body. So, there's higher level ideas. I guess a lot of the tactics are left up to the individual, but the way I think that it really works is that we have these core ideals, the four cardinal virtues: fortitude, prudence, temperance, and justice. We're taught to study the 7 liberal arts and sciences: grammar, rhetoric, logic, mathematics, geometry, astronomy, and music. Could go on and on and on of things that we're told, if you do this, you will be a better man. Some of those, tactical level ideas of how you do that is left up to the individual, and it is an individual journey. I can't make you a better man. You can't make me a better man. Do that on my own. But if we're both working on it together and at the same time, then hopefully we get there quicker. And you and I can talk about maybe some more of that tactical stuff, right? If we were both in Masonry, we both had a focus on our health, I can go be in this male-only space and discuss things over dinner and get ideas, get accountability. If I tell one of my brothers that, hey, I'm trying to lose some weight, and 2 months later I haven't lost a single pound, they should, give me a slap on the back and say, what are you doing, man? Get it together. Mm-hmm. So there's this individual path to self-improvement, but I think doing it within the fraternal context is what makes it so powerful. and then doing so with men of all different stripes. When I'm in real estate, I go to these networking meetings, and everyone else there is in real estate. But I can go to my lodge meeting and there's guys that are in real estate, there's guys that are in finance, in insurance, in construction, on and on and on, just all different walks of life and age groups. There's, I think the youngest member of my lodge is 18 to like 96, so we just have this intergenerational wealth, in my opinion, that's also kind of rare in society. I have a lot of older men that I can go to and get advice. It's basically, I've got like 100 grandpas I can go to. It's pretty rare. I can't go to the National Chamber or the Urban Land Institute meetings and like necessarily be around that same diversity of experience and of thought.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, having access to people across different generations, because I do think that one of the weirder side effects of just kind of the way civilization has been sorted in the West is that you've segregated people by generation. We've even got terms and like intergenerational fighting where you're like, the Gen Xers are this and millennials are this. It's an interesting benefit. So I'm curious what kind of people are generally attracted to Masonry, and who would you recommend it to?
Well, we get all sorts of guys that apply. Not everyone gets in. That is one misconception. A lot of people think that you have to be asked, that it's an invitation only. It's the exact opposite. You have to ask. You have to approach us. We don't recruit. We don't advertise. There's no solicitation of becoming a Mason. You'll never, or you shouldn't ever see a Mason come up to you and say, you would be a great Mason, you should join. And the reason for that is going back to that free part of free will. We want people to join of their own free will who actually want to be a part of it versus being pressured to be into it. So I think who it would appeal to the most, I mean, there's a lot of history, there's a lot of philosophy, there's a lot of spirituality and esotericism. So guys that are already into that stuff are probably more naturally drawn to it. But you don't have to come into it being an expert in comparative religion. You don't have to come into it being an expert in philosophy. That's not the point. It's more about desire. And one tagline we've had for at least a century, if not more, is that we take good men and make them better. That's not wrong. I personally don't like it because I just hear it like over and over and over again, and it's just kind of become a little bit cliche to me. But it is the truth, and that idea is like we want men of good character who are actively trying to improve themselves. And it is about taking, good men better. It's not about taking bad men and making them mediocre. There's a bar there, a minimum requirement of character, of intelligence, of values and morals that we look for. And it's not open to everyone. It's actually a unanimous vote if you go and visit a lodge and decide to petition to join whenever you're voted on. It has to be unanimous by the members there, and it's a secret ballot. So it's not always the easiest thing. All it takes is one guy to have a problem with you, and you're not in. So, well, you're not in for. You'd have to wait a year. You can reapply. It's not the total end, but.
Talk about the so you've kind of got into the process of approaching a lodge. What's the process once you're initiated? I get voted, I get accepted. What's the first stage called?
Entered apprentice.
Entered apprentice. So what is kind of that process like of getting more and more embedded in the fraternity?
There's 3 main degrees in Freemasonry: entered apprentice, fellow craft, and master mason. After you're a master mason, you're a full member. That's when you start paying dues, and you can vote, and you can travel to any lodge in the world that your lodge, that your Grand Lodge recognizes as being legit. So until the third degree, it's kind of a trial probationary period, so to speak. You are a Mason, you're just not a full member. Very imperfect analogy, but maybe you're kind of like a pledge in college, except nobody's going to call you at 3 a.m. and ask you to bring them cigarettes. So no hazing, no pledge period, but each degree is a ceremony, ritual, play. They're very theatrical, and they're all supposed to teach you something, and they build upon each other. So the process would be you would receive that first degree, and then in Tennessee, and this can vary a little bit state to state, but in Tennessee, you have to learn, you have to memorize word for word a lecture that essentially recaps everything that you went through in that degree and the teachings of that degree. And it's not written down, it's passed mouth to ear, as we say. So you have to sit down with someone who knows it, and you just go back and forth and learn it. And once you've memorized that, then you're eligible to receive the next degree. So once you're a third degree Mason, that is the highest degree. There's a lot of misconceptions because I'm sure people have heard of 33rd degrees or Knights Templar or all these other degrees, but Master Mason is the highest degree. That's when you're a full member. That's when you can travel and hold office and vote, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Anything beyond that is a voluntary, we call them appendant bodies. There's the Scottish Rite, there's the York Rite, there's the Shriners. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with Shriners hospitals, or the guys with funny fezzes at parades. Those are actually all Masons. You can't be a Shriner without being a Mason. But the, higher degrees, as they're sometimes referred to, they're voluntary. It's not a hierarchy. There's not rank. A 14th degree Mason can't tell a 7th degree Mason what to do. It's not a rank. It simply means you have chosen to go through these degrees and receive more knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And mostly things differ very little state to state, but there's regional differences. Masonry is very decentralized. In the United States, every state has a Grand Lodge, and they're totally independent of each other. There is no Grand Lodge of the United States. There's no Grand Lodge of the world. Most countries, there's a Grand Lodge of England, there's a Grand Lodge of France, there's a Grand Lodge of Germany. The U.S. is probably slightly different in that it's state to state, but you got to realize that when Masonry came over here, it was during the colonial period, and the colonies kind of viewed themselves as their own countries in a way. So they had their own Grand Lodges before we were united as one country. So the ritual, the meanings, the teachings, the morals, the main points of Masonry are the same throughout the world, but you will find regional differences within the ritual and some of the teachings. It's often just over time, some of the words have slightly changed here or there, sort of thing,
Ben Franklin was a Mason, George Washington was a Mason, Andrew Jackson was a Mason. I'm sure there's other prominent American figures. Why do you think Masonry is at the center of so many conspiracy theories?
I think people naturally fear what they don't know about. That's part of it, and part of that's our fault. I don't think we've done a good enough job over the years of just telling who we are and telling our story. I do find it fascinating, and we can get into any of this if you want. I don't purport to be able to dispel every single conspiracy. It's pretty hard to do. There's so many different accusations, but we can tackle some of the big ones if you want. But I think that over time, and we're talking about a lot of time, 300 years at least, where we've been pretty prominent across every nation, millions and millions of men. You can find Masons who have done bad things, and it's easy to point to an individual member and then try to somehow hold the entire organization accountable for that. So that's part of it. We have had a lot of men in positions of power over the years. You see some of these hoaxes, some of these lies about Masonry have been around for hundreds of years.
There was an anti-Masonic party in the U.S. for, in the mid 19th century, I think in like 1826 or so.
They ran a candidate for president against Andrew Jackson because Andrew Jackson was a Mason. So,
yeah.
Some of it comes down to like religious fundamentalism. I think the fact that we tell men that they're allowed to think whatever they want to think when it comes to religion, that bothers some people. We've always had certain clergy not be fond of us. Masonry is everywhere in the world today, except in like Islamic dictatorships. Fundamentalist Islam doesn't really like us too much. We don't have a problem with Islam. We would allow Muslims. They just don't like us very much. And I think that comes back to free association, free thought. If you're someone who's trying to control a populace, if you're trying to do anything tyrannical, one of the worst things you can have in your society is a group of men who get together regularly and are allowed to think what they want.
Do Biden and the Democrats like the Masons?
He's not one. I'm sure there are some on that level. I'm not familiar with a high-level Democrat right now that is a Mason, but I'm sure they're out there.
Is it still the case that the Catholic Church prohibits members of the church from being Masons?
They don't officially prohibit them anymore. The way I understand it, it kind of depends on different regions. You may have one archbishop that's less fond of us than another, and so it's kind of up to your own diocese, I believe. I'm not Catholic, so I could be butchering that, but I think that's kind of how it goes down to. I have Catholic members in my lodge, for what it's worth. I know several Catholic Masons, so
I was reading in preparation for this, just looking at some of the objections from I'm Presbyterian, and Andrew Jackson, for example, is Presbyterian, and there's a number of but there are sects within Presbyterian, like the Orthodox Presbyterian Church of America, and then the Reformed Presbyterian, Reformed National. I can't remember the name of these. I grew up Presbyterian Church of America, but they're smaller, more specific sects, and like they grounded their opposition to it, prohibiting members of the church from being involved in it because, for example, your inability to discuss religion within the lodge means that they can't defend the name of Christ if some contentious thing were to come up. And they also said something about, private organization, private relations between men. I don't think it's specific to Masonry, would come between a person's relationship with his church and his family and all this and that. And they saw it as kind of a subversive force. And the third one, which I hadn't even thought about, was that in the initiation rituals, you're not primed on what you're to accept before you go into them. So when you go into a ritual, you're reciting certain things and you're not, really informed ahead of time. It's part of the ritual is that you go into it, I guess blind is one way to characterize it. And, I think, it's obviously fair for a group of people to have objections to it. And I'm not really asking you to defend against those because I think those objections are grounded in a group of people who oppose it, which I think is natural. And that gets into the free association thing. Like they can associate with who they want. And if they don't want these types of people associating with it, then that's fine. But I don't know. That seems to me to be the most, on the institutional level, the main objection to it.
Yeah, I've never taken issue with if you just fundamentally disagree with who we are, that's fine. I do take objection to just outright lies. I would say a few points to those you just mentioned. One of the first things you're taught in Masonry is that God, family, business, those all come first. You're never going to put Masonry above any of those things. You may not know exactly what's going to happen in those rituals, but you are given assurances that they don't conflict with any of those things. And in my opinion, they don't, and I've seen that. I don't know of anything in Masonry that conflicts with my Christianity. I'm exposed to other lines of thought, but I'm not told I have to believe something. If anything, Masonry's made my faith stronger by putting me in, growing up in Nashville. Nashville's changed a lot, obviously, but I really wasn't exposed to a non-Christian until I went to college. Honestly, I can't tell you that. So, now in Masonry, I have friends of a lot of different faiths. That hasn't weakened my faith.
Mm-hmm.
If something like that would weaken your faith, then I think you need to examine your own faith. I think that as far as I'm trying to think of the last objection you had, or not you, but
Well, I mean the private organization component of
yeah,
it,
yeah,
which I don't think that like that's a more general the Rotary Club might even be subject to that.
yeah. We get a lot of pushback on this whole secret thing, secret society. Well, I mean, I wear a ring everywhere I go. Our buildings all have our names on them. We have websites and Instagrams and Facebook pages. There's nothing secretive about who we are, where we are, what we do. Our meetings are private. We're a private men's club. I'm on the board of some nonprofits around town, and when I joined those boards, I had to sign a non-disclosure agreement. And when I'm in that meeting, it is private, and the
Right.
discussions that we have in that meeting are private, and no one accuses that nonprofit of being a secret society. It's kind of ridiculous, to be honest. Some of our secrets, we have a secret handshake and passwords. A lot of this goes back to the time of the stonemason guilds, which is what we kind of evolved out of. And if you were a stonemason working on a cathedral in France, and then you go to then work in England, it's not like you had an internet and passports and all this stuff for people to tell and recognize who you are. So they had these modes of recognition to where you could show up in another region and prove that you were part of that guild or not. So we still keep a lot of those traditions. There are Masonic secrets, but members only information, I think, is a better way to say it. And there has to be. Why wouldn't there be? Why would there be? What's wrong with having members only information? Would you join a country club that just allowed non-members to golf on the course for free? That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I don't see anything wrong with having stuff that's for the members only. And that doesn't mean nefarious. I think the easiest way to judge whether or not we are nefarious is by our actions, and then by the actions of our enemies. Judge us by we've done so much good throughout the world. We're one of the most charitable organizations in the world. And then if you look at the people who have opposed us historically, it's Mao, it's Stalin, it's Hitler, it's everywhere that tyranny or despotism tries to take hold, one of the first things they do is they ban the Freemasons. So yeah, judge us by our enemies, judge us by our works. I could get into some of the individual accusations, but so much of it is very ridiculous to me.
So just to keep it short and sweet here, the Masons are not the ones. What is it? The Masons are not the ones leading the globalist elite cabal of child sex trafficking rings.
No,
Um,
No,
But there
shocker.
could be a Mason. There could be a Mason involved. Let's be real. There could be a couple of Masons in there.
Yeah, is there a Mason that has committed pedophilia at some point in history? Yeah, just like Catholics and Presbyterians and Church of Christers, and like, you know, we're a massive organization with millions and millions of members. There's obviously individuals who've done bad things. We immediately kick those guys out. We have Masonic trials all the time. You know, there's suspensions, there's expulsions. If you commit any crime, period, after becoming a Mason, if you're convicted of any crime, then, you know, you're out. Like there's, and it doesn't have to just be legal code. We have our own standards that we expect our members to live up to. So we're not perfect in that. We haven't always, I think Masonry as a system is awesome, but it's still a system that is composed of men, and men are fallible. So,
Of course. Well said. All right. Well, last thing. You've mentioned thinking about the future of Masonry in this, you know, interesting time that we live in. This, what do you see for the future of Masonry? How do you see the organization evolving or changing to react to the times, if at all?
yeah. So Masonry, it's very decentralized, which I think makes it robust. You know, it can be down in one area or one country and be thriving in another. We see that now. There are lodges that are just absolutely killing it. They've got 2-year wait lists to become a member, and then there's other lodges that can barely keep the lights on. To me, when I look at the lodges that are succeeding, it's the ones that are returning to tradition. I think we've seen Masonry evolve, especially after World War II and during that big boom, into a bit more of a social club. And we allowed in probably too many people. And I think that this recent downturn is actually a good thing. I think what it's forcing us to do is to get back to our roots, get back to our traditions, get back to the core of who we are. And if you look at that core of who we are, it's something that you really can't get anywhere else in society. Think of how many male-only spaces are left. You know, there's.
I mean, are there any? I went to an all-guys school, but you know, you had female teachers, so it's kind of like, you know, I mean, like you could be in the locker room, or you know, I guess at wrestling practice it was all guys, football practice, but
Yeah, there's no Boy Scouts. I mean, there are the Boy Scouts, but they allow women now, and I think that's important. And I also, I mean, for to go along with that, I think female-only spaces are very important. Yeah, I think male-only spaces are important, female-only spaces are important, and co-ed spaces are places where we come together are important. All of these serve a good societal purpose, and I think that there very clearly is an attack on masculinity within society. I think that if you look, going back to like the suicide rates and drug rates and school shootings, you know, predominantly young men, there's a crisis within our culture as it pertains to men. And I think Masonry could fill a lot of those voids.
did you see to talk about this like idea of like, so there was this sorry, just gonna change it up into this
Sure.
on a laugh here. There was this uh female only tech conference that was overrun by men claiming to be non-binary,
Yeah, I saw
and
that.
I just thought that was so funny. Um, I mean, you know, if you try to segregate these spaces with these kind of like flimsy definitions of male female, then it's just impossible to do it. So, I would imagine that there might be some Masons lodges that maybe have caved on that. I like, just like there's been churches that have caved on that. I mean, so, certainly within the Presbyterian Church, there are certain Presbyterian churches that have totally, become just totally dropped the ball on all that and allowed in the demon, so to speak.
Yeah.
I'm sure there maybe are similar Masons lodges. I'm sure.
We're very decentralized, as I said earlier, so you will find regional differences, but um, there's a group of kind of foundational, uh, we call them the ancient landmarks. So each state, each country is independent, but you can't change the landmarks. And one of those landmarks is that we are a fraternity. And you can see, one second, huh? My voice is going out a little bit. You can see that there's co-ed masonry throughout the world, and there's female masonry throughout the world, but none of those organizations are recognized by, I guess, what you could call mainstream masonry. We call it regular masonry. We view those lodges as irregular. We're not allowed to have communication with them. If you are a Mason from, I think there's a co-ed version of masonry in France, and if you're a male Mason from that Grand Lodge and you come here to Tennessee, you couldn't step foot in our meetings. You're not recognized as being regular. So I don't know of any regular Grand Lodges that have caved on that issue. But there's probably going to be more pressure at some point to do so. So I guess we'll see.
Cool. Well, Ryan, thanks so much for chatting with me. I hope if people are interested in masonry, what's the first step? Reach out to a lodge.
Yeah, if you find a lodge in your local area, hopefully they have a website or something. If not, usually on their building they have posted when they meet, and you can just show up. If you're depending on which state you're in, just Google Grand Lodge of Tennessee, Grand Lodge of Kentucky, Grand Lodge of whatever. Usually on those websites you can find a list of local lodges and when they meet and how to get in touch with them. We've also got an event coming up on the 20th that's open to the public. Let's see, westnashvillephoenix.org/liberty, if I can do a quick plug there. So westnashvillephoenix.org/liberty. And we're bringing in a Masonic author, Timothy Hogan. The title of his presentation is Freemasonry or Legacy of Liberty, Freemasonry, Egypt, and the Founding of America. So this is an event that's open to the public. We're charging ticket prices, but that all goes to our charity account. It's just a fundraiser for us as a lodge. So not for the lodge, but for our charities. So
one of the funnier well, I hope that doesn't, I need to remove that. It's for my eyes only. One of the funnier theories I've heard recently is that ancient Egypt is entirely an invention of Napoleon Bonaparte.
I haven't heard that one.
Well, like all the Rosetta Stone, all these the Sphinx was buried in under hundreds of feet of sand. The pyramids were submerged when he mounted his Egyptian campaign, and part of that, he brought along a bunch of artists and historians and et cetera to kind of document what they found. And but it's just kind of a fun theory to entertain, the idea of them inventing whole cloth, this idea of ancient Egypt. Maybe they didn't even get the civilization right. I mean, it's clearly not the people that lived there when he invaded Egypt, because they hadn't even figured out how to operate a wheelbarrow yet. Like, a wheelbarrow was a serious innovation for them. Anyway, a little sidebar. Ryan, great talking to you.
Yeah, man.
Best of luck. I'm sure I'll talk to you soon. I'm gonna sign off here. So I'm
Awesome.
gonna take you down. All right, well, that's our show for today. Office Hours episode 11. Thank our guest, Ryan Turbeville. You can tune in next week. I'll be here with Isaac Simpson. Isaac is I don't know how to describe Isaac. He's works at advertising agencies, kind of is an expert in brand identity and such, has been involved with some interesting kind of new brands, Hestia cigarettes among them. So we're going to talk to him next week. Thanks, you all, for tuning in. See you later.